Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have unveiled a joint Gaza peace plan calling for an immediate ceasefire, release of hostages and exclusion of Hamas from future governance. Trump has warned of military support for Israel if Hamas rejects the deal. The Palestinian Authority, meanwhile, welcomes the proposal and called it sincere and determined. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, European Council President Antonio Costa and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have praised this proposal and have urged for swift action. Additionally, 8 Arab and Muslim nations have hailed Trump's efforts as sincere to end the war, release the hostages and deliver urgent aid to Gaza. Donald Trump has announced sweeping new tariffs on imported wood products, including lumber, cabinets and furniture, citing national security and economic resilience. The move targets key Canadian imports and aims to boost US manufacturing. Tariff hikes will roll out starting the 14th of October. Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared that Russian forces are prevailing in the battle against Ukraine, terming it as righteous. He has emphasized upon national unity and determination. Now, despite the ongoing conflict, Putin has vowed to continue Russia's offensive efforts. Russia has denied accusations of meddling in Moldova's parliamentary elections. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova has stated that Moldova's authorities wrongly blamed Russia and not the European Union, fueling false claims of a Russian threat ahead of the vote. Afghanistan's Taliban has cut fiber optic connectivity nationwide, causing a near total internet blackout. Communication systems, banking and customs have been severely affected. Internet watchdog NetBlocks reports that national connectivity has dropped below 1% of normal levels, signaling a comprehensive shutdown. Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer has stated that large differences remain with President Trump after a key White House meeting to avoid a government shutdown. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance has stated that the U.S. is headed to shutdown and has blamed the Democrats for this. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has dissolved the government following deadly protests by youth over power and water shortages. With 22 killed and over 100 injured, he's urged dialogue with the protesters and has pledged support for businesses impacted by widespread unrest and looting. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have unveiled a new peace plan for Gaza that aims to end the nearly 2-year-long conflict in the region. The 20-point plan, which has gained Netanyahu's full support, includes key measures such as a ceasefire, a swap of hostages for Palestinian prisoners, a staged Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, the disarmament of Hamas and the creation of an international transitional government to oversee Gaza's reconstruction. While the announcement sparked cautious optimism in Israel, especially amongst the families of hostages held by Hamas, questions about whether Hamas will accept the plan still remain. Let's in fact listen in to some residents and their reactions.
אני יותר אופטימית, למרות שאני קצת פוחדת עדיין להיות כל כך אופטימית. אני פוחדת לא להתאכזב שוב. אני ממש פוחדת, אנחנו למודי סבל וניסיון רע מאוד של עסקאות שנרקמו והתפוצצו לנו בפרצוף. אבל אני רוצה לשמור על אופטימיות, שאולי סוף סוף הסיוט שלנו ייגמר.
We are trying to be optimistic today. We were very happy to hear what Trump said. We were happy to hear that Trump saw us, that he heard us calling for ending this war and bringing all the hostages, the lives and the dead, home.
אם רוצים באמת לפתור את הבעיה גם עבור העזתים וגם הישראלים, הפתרון הכי טוב זה מה שטראמפ יצא לפני כמה חודשים, שהוא טרנספר. זו בעיה שמתמשכת, זה כדור חם שאנחנו מעבירים אחד לשני כל הזמן. לבוא ולהגיד, להקים שוב פעם סוג של מדינה פלסטינית או רשות כזו או אחרת, זה שוב פעם לדרדר את הבעיה לכמה שנים הבאות. אני באמת מקווה שטראמפ וגם בנימין נתניהו חושבים יש להם את המידע והם חושבים בעומק על איך לפתור את הבעיה אחת ולתמיד. אני גם חושב, גם עבור העזתים שהדבר הכי טוב עבורם זה לעבור למקום אחר, וגם עבור ישראל. בסוף הסכסוך הוא סכסוך דתי, וזה לא משהו שיפטר על ידי הסכם כזה או אחר.
Meanwhile, President Trump has warned that if Hamas rejects the plan, Israel will have full backing of the United States to take whatever action is necessary. Now, the plan's success hinges on Hamas's response and whether broader regional support can be secured. We do know that the Arab Muslim nations have come out and supported and backed this particular plan. With us on the broadcast is Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, joining us from Cairo. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. At the outset, I'd like to ask you, are you optimistic about this particular announcement that has been made, this deal that has now been floated by the Trump administration? And in your assessment, is it a long-term solution that could lead for lasting peace?
Thank you for having me, Pia. Greetings to you and to your audience. I am very cautiously optimistic, extremely cautiously optimistic, and I cannot stress that enough, because of course, even though this is a workable plan, this is a plan that might actually be implemented. It is far from perfect. It is far from being fair. It's not even a good plan, to be completely honest with you. However, it is much better off than what was being proposed by the Israelis, which was basically the annihilation of whatever remained of Gaza, the depopulation of Gaza, and its reoccupation, basically sabotaging any future potential or future chances of the resumption of the peace process and the establishment of a Palestinian state in execution of the two-state solution, which is basically stipulated now by international law and enjoys the consensus of the international community. So this plan, with its flaws and its shortcomings, is the best that could be achieved under the current circumstances and within the current international geopolitical landscape. It seems that Israel has been pressured into accepting this plan by the Trump administration. If it was up to Mr. Netanyahu, he would have just resumed his war, which is still ongoing, by the way, because some people are acting as if the war is over. It's not, because we have not heard Hamas's response yet. Everyone now is anticipating how Hamas will respond to this, whether they will act responsibly and be realistic and be ready to make the necessary sacrifices for the greater good of the Palestinians and to alleviate their suffering, or whether they will be very narrow-minded and reject this plan, which will be a disaster for the Palestinians and for regional security, and will immediately exonerate Netanyahu from any wrongdoing or any responsibility with regards to his previous impediment of attempts to peacefully settle the war in Gaza. So now it's up to Hamas. Hamas is being subjected to very strong pressure from Arab mediators like Qatar and Egypt, and especially Qatar. It has been reported that Qatar even threatened to kick out Hamas's leadership, what remains of them in Doha, if they do not interact positively with this proposal by the President of the United States. So now it remains to be seen whether Hamas will accept, and even after, if Hamas accepts, and there is a great chance that they might do so, there will still be immense challenges on how to implement this plan, to be completely honest with you, Pia, because we have a very bad record of Israel not abiding by many of its commitments under many agreements. Israel signed off to an agreement for a ceasefire in Lebanon that obligated it to withdraw from southern Lebanon. This did not happen 1 year after the agreement now. Israel stayed way beyond their 60-day time limit for the pullout, and they still occupy significant portions of the border area between South Lebanon and Israel. So I'm afraid if we see a repetition of this in Gaza, it would be disastrous and detrimental for the success of the Trump plan.
A quick follow-up to your analysis. The plan provides for a technocratic Palestinian committee and also the creation of a board of peace. What role do you see these bodies playing in case Hamas does accept the plan in terms of post-war reconstruction?
I think that the plan is very clear within this regard, that there will be a committee, a Palestinian committee that will take on the governance of the Gaza Strip. It will be composed entirely of technocrats. Maybe one or two representatives of the Palestinian authorities will be part of this committee. However, they will not lead the efforts. And of course, it will be supervised by the so-called Board of Peace, which will be presided over by President Trump himself, and the board also will enjoy the membership of several regional leaders without specifying who they are. But we do know that Mr. Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain, will be on the board. So probably since he was mentioned in the media and now by President Trump, he will have a central role in being the de facto governor of Gaza in the post-war period. And by the way, even according to the plan, Pia, and to the sources we have read and even spoken to, the plan will be implemented whether Hamas accepts or not, because what has been said is if Hamas does not accept, then what President Trump called the terror-free zone, meaning the areas that do not have any Hamas control anymore, the plan will be implemented in it, and the governance of the committee that is stipulated by the plan will begin in these areas. So we are seeing that the Americans are bent on implementing certain realities, whether the Palestinian faction Hamas likes it or not. And I think that most of the Palestinians would support such a plan, and also the Palestinian Authority, the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, the officially recognized government of the State of Palestine, which is now recognized by 159 countries all around the world, has accepted the plan, even though it is far from perfect, even though it undermines its own rights to immediately govern the Gaza Strip as part of the State of Palestine, which is recognized by the international community. Yet it is being pragmatic and being realistic, and they are positively interacting with the Trump plan, because the alternative, Pia, is more carnage and a resumption of the Israeli genocide.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other serious developments from the Middle East, and as far as the situation in the Middle East is concerned, we're now in fact learning that the White House is informed that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has apologized to Qatar and has promised that there will be no further strikes on its territory. The apology came during a phone call where Netanyahu in fact tendered and expressed regret over the strikes that had taken place in Doha. Now, according to US officials, Qatar, Israel and the United States will now form a trilateral group in order to resolve what are being called mutual grievances. Netanyahu has told the Prime Minister of Qatar that Israel was targeting Hamas and that he regrets the violation of Qatari sovereignty. The Israeli Prime Minister's office confirmed that Netanyahu has welcomed Trump's proposal to create this forum, which is aimed at easing tensions. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Mohammed Osman. Sir, how do you, in your assessment, how do you see this trilateral mechanism working out, and what are some of the key areas, the mutual grievances that have been, quoted in the White House readout that could perhaps be addressed by this mechanism?
I think that President Trump understands fully that the success of his peace plan moving forward in Gaza requires a restoration of trust between Qatar and Israel. Qatar being the handler of Hamas, basically, and they have been accorded with this mission to handle Hamas a very long time ago by the United States and Israel. So when Israel bombed the negotiating or targeted the negotiating team, Hamas negotiating team and leaders in Doha, it complicated things, and it definitely adversely affected the bridges of trust between Tel Aviv and Doha. So now it's up to the Americans to restore the confidence and mend ties between both countries. I think that they are on the right track in order to restore their relationship. Apparently, the Qataris were demanding an apology. They got their apology yesterday when Prime Minister Netanyahu was basically forced by President Trump to make a call to the Qatari Prime Minister, Mohammed Al Thani, and present him with an apology so that they can move on with the regular business. And we should never forget, Pia, that Hamas governed Gaza with a very tacit Israeli consent. And Qatar bankrolled Hamas's government in Gaza through Israel. And Israel was very content. Netanyahu was very content with this arrangement because it deepened Palestinian divisions and evaporated any serious chances for resuming the peace settlement and the implementation of two-state solution because of the internal Palestinian division. So Hamas basically did fit the Israeli plan for basically complete domination and the implementation of the so-called one-state solution. Only the Jewish state should exist, and there shouldn't be a Palestinian state. So, of course, this all came down on Netanyahu's head when the 7th of October happened, because he basically bred this monster in the Gaza Strip, fed it for years, and then it exploded in his face, and he had to bear the consequences at the end of the day. And Qatar was an instrumental part of this equation. So now for any new arrangement for a peace plan in Gaza, and especially with the disengagement of Hamas or the eventual disarmament of Hamas and exit from the Gaza Strip, it will require a central role for the mediators, Egypt and Qatar, and especially Qatar, who will play a prominent role in that. That, of course, if Hamas accepts the deal.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for joining us on the broadcast today, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we shift our focus towards developments coming in from Afghanistan. Afghanistan is currently in the middle of a total internet blackout after the Taliban government imposed a nationwide telecommunications shutdown, affecting a population of approximately 43 million people. This move follows weeks of disrupted internet connectivity, with fiber optic links severed in multiple areas. Telephone services, mobile internet and satellite TV have been impacted, leaving many residents without access to communications. Meanwhile, international agencies have reportedly lost contact with offices in Kabul. The Taliban has not offered any official explanation for the shutdown, but this latest move is being seen as part of the government's efforts to enforce its interpretation of the Sharia. This is in line with restrictions that have been imposed since the Taliban took over in 2021. Moreover, the officials have confirmed that the telecom shutdown will continue until further notice. Additionally, the governor in northern Balkh province, Haji Zaid, has mentioned that an alternative system would be established within the country to serve essential needs, but no further details have been provided yet. The impact of this internet shutdown is being felt across various sectors. Flights out of Kabul have been disrupted, with at least 8 now being cancelled, according to tracking services. Diplomatic officials have also warned that the outage in telecom services could have far-reaching impact on the country's banking as well as e-commerce systems. All right, viewers, with that, we shift our focus towards the United States of America. A partisan standoff over healthcare and spending is threatening to trigger the first U.S. government shutdown in almost 7 years, with Democrats and Republicans in Congress unable to find agreement even as thousands of federal workers stand to be furloughed or permanently laid off. Now, the government will shut down today if the Senate does not pass a House measure that would extend federal funding for 7 weeks while lawmakers finish their work on annual spending bills. The Senate Democrats have stated that they won't vote for it unless Republicans include an extension of expiring healthcare benefits, amongst other demands. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump and Republicans are refusing to negotiate at all, arguing that it is a stripped-down, clean bill that should be non-controversial. Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer has now stated that the White House meeting with President Donald Trump and other senior Republican leaders ended without any agreement to avoid an imminent government shutdown. Schumer has stated that there are still large differences between the two parties. The deadline, of course, is looming large. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance has stated that the federal government is headed to shut down in less than 36 hours and has blamed the congressional Democrats for placing conditions on support for a short-term budget bill. Listen in to what Vance had to say.
Well, first of all, we have to keep essential services functioning as well as possible if the Democrats shut down the government, and Russ has been tasked with making sure that's possible. Now, you asked about negotiations. One of the things I admired about the president, but frankly the entire team's approach during the conversation we just had with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries was, they have some crazy ideas. Giving taxpayer money to illegal aliens for health care, that's a crazy idea. Funding transgender surgeries in Peru, that's a crazy idea. But they had some ideas that I actually thought were reasonable, and they had some ideas that the president thought was reasonable. What's not reasonable is to hold those ideas as leverage and to shut down the government unless we give you everything that you want. Disagreements about tax policy, but you don't shut that government down. We have disagreements about healthcare policy, but you don't shut the government down. You don't use your policy disagreements as leverage to not pay our troops, to not have essential services of government actually function. You don't say the fact that you disagree about a particular tax provision is an excuse for shutting down the people's government and all the essential services that come along with it.
With us on the broadcast is Mr. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. In your view, is what we're seeing the fact that differences between Democrats and Republicans has escalated to the point of being on the brink of government shutdown? Is this merely a policy disagreement or political posturing?
It's a bit of both, because I think the Trump government wants to use this issue to sack a lot of people. And the Democrats want to use the issue to get a lot of money sanctioned for the projects that they are backing, including health facilities for immigrants, illegal, many of them. So I think the Trump administration is prepared to bring this to a head, have the government shut down, sack a lot of people before it is restored.
And sir, in your assessment, which party has more to lose politically if the shutdown does take place?
Well, the Trump government thinks the Democrats will be embarrassed, and the Democrats think that this would be a wrong thing to do for a ruling party. So I think they're both very clear that the other guy is embarrassed, not them.
All right, sir. I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking more updates, this time from Europe. The foreign ministers of the Weimar Triangle, including France, Germany and Poland, have issued a joint statement in Warsaw asserting that NATO remains united against Russian provocation in Europe. In Warsaw, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadful has expressed that no NATO member will be left alone in dealing with Russia's actions, particularly referring to a recent wave of hybrid attacks targeting European nations. Listen in.
In den letzten Tagen haben wir eine neue Welle hybrider Angriffe auf NATO-Staaten erlebt. Hier in Polen, in Estland und in Rumänien und zuletzt auch eine Reihe ungeklärter Drohnenvorfälle in Dänemark. Diese Aktionen sind kein Zufall, sondern Teil eines Musters, das unsere Lufträume, unsere kritische Infrastruktur, insgesamt unsere Verteidigungsbereitschaft ins Visier nimmt. Russland will unsere Entschlossenheit testen, will Unruhe auslösen. Das ist gefährlich und muss klar und geeint beantwortet werden. Unsere Antwort ist deswegen unmissverständlich. Die NATO ist jederzeit wachsam, sie ist jederzeit handlungsfähig und sie schützt jeden Zentimeter unseres Bündnisgebiets.
The German foreign minister has further highlighted that Russia's behavior could be met with peace talks if Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to. But he's claimed that instead Russia has chosen to escalate the conflict. He's further added that Germany will continue to support Ukraine both militarily and politically, toughening sanctions against Russia and seeking long-term solutions to finance Ukraine's self-defense. Moreover, Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski has also emphasized the importance of tougher sanctions to counter Russia's war. Let's in fact listen in to what he had to say.
Z satysfakcją odnotowałem jednoznaczną odpowiedź naszych weimarskich partnerów na te ostatnie rosyjskie działania. Dziękuję za wzmocnienie obrony powietrznej wschodniej flanki przez dodatkowe francuskie i niemieckie myśliwce. To widomy znak solidarności i jedności naszych sojuszników z NATO i partnerów z Unii Europejskiej.
With us on the broadcast is Mr. Gautam Mukherjee. Sir, interesting meeting, just as some drone incursions have been reported in Poland, in Romania and Lithuania. Earlier, Ukraine as well accused Hungary of using reconnaissance drones to map out some critical infrastructure along with its borders with Ukraine. Now, what's interesting is that Zelensky has come out and stated that NATO is not acting nearly as toughly as it should be against these drone incursions. Why do you think NATO is adopting this posture at the moment? Is it strategic in order to not escalate and engage in a hot war with Russia?
Yes, absolutely right. It would be silly to get into a hot war with Russia over reconnaissance drones. Zelensky has nothing to lose by provoking the NATO countries into joining in, even though it could escalate into World War III. He has his own agenda to try and involve the NATO forces, but I think they are clear, at least for now, that they don't want to get into a hot war with Russia and are willing to overlook it, take countermeasures in terms of surveillance themselves, and leave it at that.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your perspective with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to Madagascar. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has dissolved his government following deadly protests that have left at least 22 people dead and over 100 injured. Now, Rajoelina apologized for the government's failures and has pledged to open dialogue with the protesters while promising support for businesses affected by the looting. Authorities, meanwhile, have imposed a curfew after clashes erupted, with police firing tear gas to disperse crowds. Protesters, meanwhile, voiced frustration, stating that they don't get to speak about the country's problems. Listen in.
Génération TikTok, génération Tsmaïninin, génération Nunum Tour, ça fait la série di Tenya, en le mararo firenenai. Facciamo noti Angela Zuella, refa yanau zanum tarken like greve, de met malala cape, farefa isa hai piana cha, funa mzuru antanja. 16 ans au pouvoir, on lui a donné maintes chances. Il nous fait des promesses d'ivrogne. Il ne pense qu'à son intérêt et à l'intérêt de sa propre famille. Fasayati, c'est la famine qui nous tue.
Afaka manao hevitra na mihetsika dia efa terena vao miteny dia efa tapenam-bava inona amin'izany ary nareo fa maternelle ve nareo hoe mipetraka zay le izy zay mahazo atsika dia anakin'izay ve atsika 4 taona zany tsika ienan'izay raha tsy hanova zavatra mitsangana dia mila manova zavatra raha tia zavatra tsara dia mila mitsakantsika rehetrarehetra.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.